TLDR, got fired for missing my boss's birthday party. Turned out he was running a massive fraud operation. Now he's in federal prison and I have my own research center. Holy shit, Reddit. I still can't believe this actually happened to me. This was about a year ago, but I'm finally ready to tell this story because the trial just ended and I can legally talk about everything. Buckle up, because this is a wild ride. So I'm a research scientist, was working at this pharmaceutical company called Blackstone Pharmaceuticals in Denver for 9 years. I'm talking 60-hour weeks, sleeping in the lab, missing family dinners, basically living and breathing clinical trial data. My colleagues called me the data whisperer because I could spot patterns in research results that others missed. I was that nerd who got excited about statistical significance and enzyme levels. My boss, Richard Blackstone, was your classic nepotism hire. CEO's nephew, handed a VP position with 0 actual qualifications. Picture this: expensive suits that cost more than my monthly rent, fake smile that never reached his eyes, and the kind of arrogance that comes from never having to work for anything. This guy thought scientists were just expensive obstacles between him and his quarterly bonuses. I need to paint you a picture of what my life was like before everything went to shit. I was basically married to my job. My apartment was a disaster because I spent maybe 6 hours there a day just to sleep and shower. My sister Sarah was constantly on my case about visiting our dad, who was fighting pancreatic cancer. My social life was non-existent. But I loved the work. I genuinely believed we were helping people, developing medications that could save lives. The setup. So it's a Tuesday night in March, around 9 p.m. I'm in my lab, which I'd basically claimed as my personal office after hours. The place was a mess. Coffee cups everywhere, printouts of clinical data covering every surface, my whiteboard covered in calculations that probably looked like beautiful mind shit to anyone else. I'm working on the final analysis for our new drug, Vitacor. This was supposed to be our big breakthrough, a treatment for chronic kidney disease that affects millions of Americans. We're talking about a potential billion-dollar drug that could genuinely change people's lives. Then I get this email, subject line, mandatory attendance, Richard's birthday celebration. I stare at this thing for like 10 minutes. Mandatory? For a birthday party? What kind of psychopath makes their birthday party mandatory for employees? But here's the kicker. I had just spent the last 6 hours going through the latest clinical trial data, and it was absolutely fucking terrifying. Our miracle drug was causing severe liver damage in 23% of test subjects, not mild side effects, not monitor liver function. We're talking about full-blown liver toxicity that could kill people. Earlier that day, I'd gotten an email from Richard's office sent by his assistant, because God forbid he write his own emails, saying, Dr. Reeves, please adjust the statistical parameters for the Vitacor analysis. We need to find a way to make these results work for our timeline. Translation: make the deadly side effects disappear so we can keep our launch date. So I'm sitting there, looking at data that shows our drug is basically playing Russian roulette with people's livers, and this asshole wants me to drop everything to celebrate his birthday? I didn't respond to the party invite. Didn't show up. Instead, I stayed in my lab until 3 a.m, running the numbers again and again, hoping I'd made some kind of mistake. Spoiler alert, I hadn't. The morning from hell. I get to work the next morning at 7:30 a.m, yes, I'm that person, and immediately get an email. Please report to conference room A immediately. Conference room A was what we called the execution chamber. It's where people went to get fired. Glass walls, fancy table, the kind of room designed to make you feel small and powerless. I walk in and it's like a tribunal. Richard's sitting at the head of the table in his perfectly pressed navy suit, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else but having to deal with an insubordinate employee. To his right is his uncle, James Blackstone, the CEO, this old guy who founded the company and had the emotional range of a granite statue. Their head lawyer, Michael Torres, is shuffling through papers with the efficiency of someone who's done this dance before. And Dr. Patricia Wells, our chief medical officer, is sitting there looking like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Dr. Reeves, Richard says, not even bothering to look up from his phone. Thank you for finally joining us. I'm still standing there with my coffee, confused as hell. You said it was urgent? Richard finally looks up, and I swear this fucker had the audacity to smirk. It is urgent. As of this morning, your position has been eliminated. Budget restructuring, you understand. I literally laughed, like out loud. Are you kidding me? Eliminated? I just delivered the Vitacor analysis yesterday. Your research methods have become incompatible with our business objectives, he continues, like he's reading from a script. We need team players, people who understand that perfect data is sometimes the enemy of good medicine. That's when it hit me. They weren't firing me for missing a party. They were firing me because I wouldn't falsify clinical trial data. You want me to hide the liver toxicity data, I said. It wasn't a question. The room went dead silent. Patricia actually flinched. The lawyer stopped shuffling papers. Richard leaned forward, and I'll never forget what he said next. Dr. Reeves, don't ever think your conscience is worth more than this company's future. That line. That fucking line has been burned into my brain ever since. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my coffee at his smug face. I wanted to lecture him about the Hippocratic Oath and scientific integrity and how many people would die if we released a drug with 23% liver toxicity rates. Instead, I said, I need to call my dad's oncologist and tell him I'm losing my insurance. When should I expect my final paycheck? I don't think Richard expected that response. He actually looked uncomfortable for about 2 seconds. HR will contact you about Cobra and final payment, Patricia said quietly. First words she'd spoken the entire meeting. I gathered my dignity, what was left of it, and walked out. 9 years of 60-hour weeks, 3 FDA approvals, dozens of published papers, gone because I wouldn't help cover up data that could kill people. The mysterious text. I'm in the parking garage, sitting in my car, having what I can only describe as a complete emotional breakdown. I'm thinking about my dad's cancer treatment, my mortgage, my complete lack of savings because I'd been putting everything into my work. Then my phone buzzes. Unknown number. Storage unit 247, Alpine self-storage off I-25. Key taped under the fire extinguisher outside your office. Come alone, trust me. A friend who values integrity. I stare at this text for a solid 5 minutes. This is either someone trying to help me, B, someone trying to murder me, C, some elaborate prank. But honestly, at that point, I had nothing left to lose. My career was over, my dad's treatment was in jeopardy, and I was probably about to be blacklisted from every pharmaceutical company in the country. So I drive to this storage facility. It's one of those orange metal building complexes that looks like it's seen better days. Unit 247 is tucked away in the back, far from the main office where anyone might notice comings and goings. I find the key exactly where the text said it would be. My hands are shaking as I unlock the unit and roll up the metal door. Holy fucking shit! The unit is floor-to-ceiling boxes, each one labelled with dates going back 5 years. There's a folding table in the centre with a laptop and a handwritten note. The note that changed everything. Dr. Reeves, if you're reading this, then Richard has finally crossed the line I've been waiting for him to cross. What you're about to see will change everything. These files contain backup copies of every major research project conducted at Blackstone for the past 5 years, including the original unmanipulated data from the VitaCore trials. You'll also find financial records showing systematic bribes to FDA officials, falsified safety reports submitted to regulatory agencies, and communications between Richard and offshore pharmaceutical manufacturers regarding data manipulation. Everything is documented, dated, and legally obtained. I've been building this insurance policy since the day I realized what Richard was planning to do to the company I helped build. 6 months ago, I filed patent applications under your name for 3 different pharmaceutical processes you developed during your time at Blackstone. If you're ever terminated without cause, and refusing to commit scientific fraud definitely qualifies, those patents revert to your ownership. They can fire the scientists, but they can't steal the science. Use this information wisely. The patients whose lives on honest research deserve better than what Richard has been giving them. Dr. Marcus Webb. Jesus Christ. Marcus was the former chief research officer, the guy who'd hired me 9 years ago. Brilliant scientist, completely ethical, the kind of mentor every researcher dreams of having. 2 years ago, he'd suddenly retired to spend time with family. The official story was early retirement, but there had been rumors about conflicts with management over research standards. Turns out Marcus hadn't retired. He'd been preparing for war. Diving into the evidence, I spent the next 6 hours in that storage unit, going through file after file. The laptop had everything organized by date and project. It was like reading the secret history of pharmaceutical corruption. The VitaCore files were even worse than I'd thought. The original data showed 31% liver toxicity, not the 23% I'd calculated from the manipulated dataset they'd given me. They'd been hiding the worst cases, reclassifying severe adverse events as unrelated incidents. But VitaCore was just the tip of the iceberg. Richard had been systematically corrupting clinical trials for years. Nexeril, depression medication, hid data showing increased suicide risk in teenagers. Cardiomax, heart medication, suppressed evidence of stroke risk in elderly patients. Immunotech, autoimmune treatment, covered up cases of severe immune system suppression. Each time, the pattern was the same. Scientists would report safety concerns, Richard would pressure them to adjust the data, and anyone who refused would be reassigned, demoted, or fired. The financial records were even more damning. Richard had been paying off Dr. James Morrison, a senior FDA reviewer, for over 2 years. $2.3 million total, always routed through consulting fees to shell companies Morrison had set up. In return, Morrison fast-tracked Blackstone's drug approvals and downplayed safety concerns in his reviews. There were photos, bank transfer records, email chains discussing specific bribes, audio recordings of phone calls. Marcus had been building a federal case for years. The most chilling file was labeled Patient Outcomes, Real-World Data. Marcus had been tracking patients who'd been prescribed Blackstone's drugs and cross-referencing their medical records with adverse events. The pattern was horrifying. 127 cases of liver failure from Vitacor, only 12 had been reported to the FDA. 89 cases of suicide in teenagers taking Nexeril, reported as unrelated incidents. 234 strokes in elderly patients on CardioMax, classified as normal age-related events. Real people, real families, real deaths, all to protect Richard's profit margins. Taking it to the press. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I needed someone with the resources and credibility to expose this properly. Lisa Rodriguez at the Denver Post had broken several major corruption stories, and she had a reputation for protecting her sources. I called her office the next morning. Ms. Rodriguez, I have evidence of the largest pharmaceutical fraud case in Colorado history. Can we meet? 30 minutes later, I'm sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Denver, sliding a USB drive across the table to this sharp-eyed woman who looked like she could smell bullshit from 3 counties away. Dr. Reeves, she said after I'd given her the basic overview, what you're describing isn't just corporate misconduct. This is systematic fraud that's put hundreds of thousands of patients at risk. If even half of what you're telling me is true, this story will destroy Blackstone and trigger federal investigations. She spent the next 72 hours verifying everything. She contacted medical experts, reviewed the financial records, reached out to FDA sources. When she called me back, her voice was tight with controlled anger. Dr. Reeves, this is Pulitzer-level investigative journalism. But I need you to understand, when this breaks, you're going to be at the center of a media firestorm. Richard Blackstone has a lot of money and a lot of lawyers. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Jennifer Walsh, a 34-year-old teacher from Colorado Springs whose name was in Marcus's files. She'd needed a liver transplant after 3 months on Vitacor. I thought about Robert Chen, a grandfather from Boulder, whose family had watched him deteriorate before discovering the cause. Lisa, I said, I became a scientist to help people, not hurt them. If exposing this saves even one life, it's worth whatever they throw at me. The federal intervention. 3 days later, I'm sitting in my kitchen at 6:47 a.m., scrolling through job listings and wondering how I'm going to pay rent when my phone rings. Unknown number. Dr. Morgan Reeves? Speaking. This is Director Janet Chen from the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations. We need to discuss your former employer, Blackstone Pharmaceuticals. Can you be in Washington, D.C. tomorrow morning? I nearly dropped my coffee. The FDA? How did you? Dr. Reeves, we've been conducting a parallel investigation into irregularities in Blackstone's regulatory filings for the past 8 months. Recent information has come to light that corroborates our suspicions and fills in several gaps in our evidence. Your cooperation could be vital to building a case that protects patients and holds pharmaceutical companies accountable for fraud. 8 months. They'd been investigating Richard since before I was even fired. What kind of cooperation are we talking about? The kind that ensures pharmaceutical companies can't hide life-threatening side effects from the public. We understand you have documentation that supports our investigation. I looked out my kitchen window at the morning traffic on I-25, all those people driving to work, trusting that their medications were safe, that the FDA was protecting them, that companies like Blackstone had their best interests at heart. Yes, I said quietly. I have documentation, financial records, clinical trial data, patient outcome statistics, audio recordings, everything you need to prove systematic fraud. Outstanding. We'll have a plane ticket waiting for you at Denver International. Dr. Reeves? Yes? Thank you for choosing to do the right thing. You may have saved more lives than you'll ever know. FBI raid day. 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in my apartment watching live news coverage of FBI agents walking out of Blackstone Pharmaceuticals carrying boxes of evidence. The headline at the bottom of the screen reads, Federal Raid on Major Pharmaceutical Company. Richard's perp walk was everything I dreamed it would be. Gone was the expensive suit and arrogant smirk. He looked like exactly what he was, a criminal in handcuffs, shuffling past news cameras with his head down while his lawyers tried to shield him from photographers. The local news reporter was practically vibrating with excitement. This morning's raid is connected to allegations of systematic fraud, bribery of federal officials, and deliberate suppression of life-threatening side effects in multiple medications. Sources close to the investigation suggest that a whistleblower provided evidence that exposed a corruption network reaching from Colorado to Washington, D.C. My phone was ringing non-stop. Lisa Rodriguez's expose had hit the Denver Post's website at 6 a.m. and by noon it was trending on every social media platform. The headline, Pharmaceutical Empire Built on Lies. FDA investigation uncovers massive corruption scheme that put patients at risk. But the call that mattered most came from my sister Sarah. Morgan, Dad's watching the news. He wants to talk to you. I drove to Presbyterian Medical Center where Dad was getting his weekly chemotherapy. He was in his recliner, IV in his arm, watching CNN coverage of the Blackstone raid. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," he said when I sat down next to him. "I know this couldn't have been easy." "Dad, I'm probably going to lose my career over this. No pharmaceutical company will ever hire me again." He squeezed my hand with what little strength he had. "Honey, some things are more important than careers. Those people you saved, their families will never know your name, but they'll get to hug their loved ones tonight because you had the courage to speak up." That's when I started crying. Sitting in the oncology ward, holding my dad's hand while federal agents dismantled the company that had tried to silence me. The unexpected visitor. A week later, I'm in my pajamas at 9 a.m. Unemployment has its perks. Watching Netflix and feeling sorry for someone knocks on my door. I open it to find this incredibly put-together woman in a navy business suit. Silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, eyes that could cut glass, the kind of presence that makes you straighten your posture involuntarily. "Dr. Reeves? I'm Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Biotech. May I come in?" Holy shit. Victoria Sterling was a legend in pharmaceutical circles. Sterling Biotech was Blackstone's biggest competitor, but they had a completely different reputation. Ethical clinical trials, transparent reporting, the company that other companies aspired to be. I'm standing there in my Batman pajamas, trying to figure out why one of the most powerful CEOs in the pharmaceutical industry is on my doorstep. I'm not really dressed for company," I stammer. She smiles, and it completely transforms her face. "Dr. Reeves, I'm not here for a social call. I'm here to offer you a job." We sit in my living room, which is a disaster zone of takeout containers and job search printouts. Victoria doesn't seem to notice or care. "Dr. Reeves, what you've done took extraordinary courage. Exposing Richard Blackstone's fraud network couldn't have been easy, and it certainly wasn't profitable. Most people would have taken the severance money and kept quiet. It was the right thing to do. Exactly the answer I hoped to hear." She opens her briefcase and pulls out a leather portfolio. "Chief Research Officer, Sterling Biotech. Your own department, unlimited research budget, complete authority over clinical trial protocols. No interference from marketing, no pressure to manipulate data, no compromises on patient safety." I stare at the portfolio like it might explode. "Ma'am, I just got fired for having ethics. Every pharmaceutical company in the country probably has me on some kind of blacklist." "Dr. Reeves, you didn't get fired for having ethics. You got fired for refusing to be complicit in fraud. That's exactly the kind of person we want running our research division." She leans forward, her voice taking on an intensity that makes me sit up straighter. "We want to establish the Morgan Reeves Center for Pharmaceutical Ethics, an independent research institute within Sterling that will audit clinical trials across the industry. Your experiences have shown us the need for an internal watchdog with real authority." My throat goes dry. "A center named after me? Your name carries weight now, Dr. Reeves. You're the woman who brought down Blackstone Pharmaceuticals, who chose patients over profits. We want that reputation associated with our company." I walk to my window, looking out at the Rocky Mountains that have watched over my entire career in Colorado. Somewhere across the city, Richard is probably meeting with lawyers, trying to figure out how to avoid federal prison. Meanwhile, I'm being offered the chance to build something better from the ground up. "Dr. Reeves?" Victoria's voice is patient but expectant. I turn back to her, and for the first time in weeks, I feel something that isn't despair or anger. I feel hope. I accept. But I have conditions. Her eyebrows rise slightly. "Name them." "Complete transparency in all clinical trials. Published results regardless of outcomes. Real-time safety monitoring with immediate public disclosure. And if we ever discover that a competitor's drug poses safety risks, we share that information immediately, even if it hurts our own products." Victoria stands and extends her hand. "Dr. Reeves, you just described exactly the kind of pharmaceutical company this industry needs. Welcome to Sterling Biotech." The trial of the century. Richard's trial was a 3-month media circus that dominated headlines across the country. Every day brought new revelations, new victims, new evidence of just how deep the corruption went. The most devastating testimony came from Dr. Patricia Wells, Blackstone's former chief medical officer. She'd plea bargained for a reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation, and her testimony was absolutely brutal. Richard made it clear that questioning safety data wasn't just insubordination. It was career suicide, she said, her voice shaking as she faced the packed courtroom. He called it strategic data presentation, but we all knew what it really was. It was fraud. Dr. Reeves tried to warn us, tried to make us see that we were putting patients at risk. I wish I'd had her courage to stand up to him instead of choosing my paycheck over my principles. The day Jennifer Walsh testified was the day I knew Richard was finished. She walked slowly to the witness stand, still pale from her liver transplant recovery, and looked directly at Richard as she spoke. "I trusted my doctor," she said, her voice steady but filled with pain. "My doctor trusted the FDA. None of us knew that the people we trusted had been bought and paid for by the company that was slowly poisoning me. I almost died because this man decided my life was worth less than his quarterly bonus. Richard stared at his hands throughout her testimony. He couldn't meet her eyes. The financial evidence was overwhelming. Dr. James Morrison, the FDA reviewer, had received $2.3 million over 18 months, always routed through consulting fees to shell companies. In return, he'd fast-tracked drug approvals and minimized safety concerns in his reports. The most damning evidence came from Richard's own communications. Marcus had recorded several phone calls where Richard explicitly discussed bribing officials and hiding adverse event data. In one recording, Richard's voice was crystal clear. Look, a few liver problems are statistically insignificant compared to the millions of patients who could benefit from this drug. We adjust the data to reflect the bigger picture. That's all. When that recording played in the courtroom, I watched several jurors' faces change. The abstract concept of data manipulation became real when they heard Richard casually dismissing patient deaths as statistically insignificant. The defense tried everything. They blamed subordinates, claimed Richard was unaware of the financial transactions, argued that aggressive marketing was standard industry practice. None of it worked. The evidence was too comprehensive, too damning. Richard received 18 years in federal prison. Dr. Morrison got 12 years. 6 other Blackstone executives received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The class action lawsuit resulted in $2.3 billion in damages paid to victims and their families. But the real victory wasn't in the prison sentences, it was in the regulatory changes that followed. The aftermath. The trial triggered the most sweeping pharmaceutical reforms in FDA history. Every clinical trial now requires independent safety monitoring. Financial relationships between companies and reviewers must be publicly disclosed, and scientists who report safety violations are protected by stronger whistleblower laws. But more than the legal changes, there was a cultural shift. Medical schools started requiring ethics courses based on our case study. Pharmaceutical companies began competing on transparency rather than just profit margins. International health organizations adopted our safety protocols. The Reeves Center for Pharmaceutical Ethics opened 6 months after I joined Sterling Biotech. Our mission was simple: ensure that what happened at Blackstone could never happen again. In our first year, we audited 43 clinical trials across 6 companies. We identified 17 safety violations that could have caused serious harm or death if they'd gone undetected. Our transparency protocols became the gold standard that other companies started adopting voluntarily. The work is incredible, but it's also emotionally heavy. Every safety violation we catch represents real people who could have been hurt. Every corrupt practice we expose represents families who trusted that their medications were safe. Last month, a young scientist named Dr. Amanda Foster contacted me. She'd been facing pressure from her employer, ChemCorp Industries, to hide neurological damage data for a new pesticide. Dr. Reeves, she said when we met for coffee, my company discovered a new product causes brain damage in laboratory mice. The effects are severe: memory loss, cognitive decline, motor function problems, but they want me to reclassify the findings as inconclusive, so they can meet their product launch deadline. I leaned forward, remembering my own moment of truth in Richard's office. Amanda, what does your conscience tell you to do? Document everything. Contact the EPA. Stop this chemical from reaching the market before it can hurt children. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking slightly. Then you already know what you need to do. The question is whether you're ready to pay the price for doing it. We spent 3 hours planning her approach: how to document the evidence safely, which EPA contacts to reach out to, legal protections available for whistleblowers. I also gave her the phone number for our legal defense fund. Sterling Biotech had established a $50 million foundation to protect scientists from retaliation when they expose safety violations. 2 weeks later, ChemCorp's pesticide was pulled from pre-market testing after Amanda presented her evidence to EPA investigators. The company tried to fire her, but our legal team intervened. She now heads environmental safety at a company that actually values scientific integrity. No children got brain damage from that pesticide. That's what victory looks like in this business. Personal reflections. It's been a year since I walked out of Blackstone Pharmaceuticals with a termination letter and a shattered sense of what my career meant. I thought I was losing everything. Instead, I was finding out who I really was. My dad's cancer treatment has been incredibly successful. The latest scans show no sign of disease, and Sterling's insurance covers everything without question. He watches every interview I give, every news story about pharmaceutical reform, and he tells people his daughter is the one who stood up to the bad guys. My relationship with my sister Sarah has never been stronger. She was the one who kept encouraging me to follow my conscience, even when it seemed like career suicide. She's also the one who reminded me that some things are more important than job security. Richard Blackstone is currently serving his sentence at a federal correctional institution in Texas. His appeals have all been denied. His nephew's status couldn't save him from the consequences of putting profit over people. Victoria Sterling has become more than just my boss. She's become a mentor and friend. She taught me that integrity isn't just about individual choices. It's about building systems that make ethical behavior easier and corruption harder. The most meaningful feedback I get isn't from pharmaceutical industry conferences or medical journals. It's from families like Jennifer Walsh's who send me photos of their kids' graduations and birthday parties, moments that might not have happened if we hadn't stopped Richard when we did. But I also think about the families we couldn't save. The people who died from Blackstone's drugs before we exposed the fraud. Robert Chen, the grandfather whose liver failure was listed as an unrelated incident. Maria Santos, the teenager whose suicide while taking Nexerol was classified as having no connection to medication. David Kim, the elderly man whose stroke while on Cardiomax was dismissed as age-related. Their names are in Marcus Webb's files. Their stories drive me to work harder, dig deeper, hold pharmaceutical companies to higher standards. The bigger picture. What happened at Blackstone wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of an industry that had lost its way, where profit margins mattered more than patient safety and quarterly earnings were more important than scientific integrity. The pharmaceutical industry develops medications that can save lives, cure diseases, and reduce suffering. It's work that matters on a fundamental human level. But when that work gets corrupted by greed and corporate pressure, it becomes something that destroys lives instead of saving them. I've learned that speaking up isn't a one-time act of courage. It's a daily choice to prioritize truth over comfort, integrity over security, patient safety over personal advancement. Every scientist faces moments where they have to choose between their ethical principles and their career prospects. The pressure to compromise, to adjust inconvenient data, to stay quiet about safety concerns, it's constant and pervasive. But I've also learned that you're not alone in these fights. There are people like Marcus Webb who build safety nets for whistleblowers. People like Victoria Sterling who create companies where ethics matter. People like Lisa Rodriguez who expose corruption and hold powerful people accountable. Most importantly, there are patients and families who depend on scientists to choose their well-being over corporate profits. They may never know our names, but their lives hang in the balance of our decisions. Final thoughts. If you're reading this and you work in any industry where public safety is at stake, pharmaceuticals, automotive, aviation, food safety, environmental protection, remember that your expertise comes with responsibility. Document everything. Know your legal protections. Find allies who share your ethical standards, and never let anyone convince you that doing the right thing is naive or impractical. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you ever do. Getting fired for refusing to commit fraud led me to my dream job where integrity is valued over profit. Richard tried to teach me that conscience was expensive. Instead, he showed me that it's priceless. Your ethics aren't negotiable. Your integrity isn't for sale. And the world needs people willing to choose truth over comfort, life, even when it costs everything you think you want. Choose courage, choose truth, choose the future you want to live with when you look back on these moments years from now. Because sometimes, when you fight hard enough for what's right, you discover that your conscience isn't just worth fighting for, it's the most valuable thing you've ever owned. Edit. Holy shit, this post exploded. Thanks for all the awards and messages. A few people have asked for verification. Yes, I'm Dr. Morgan Reeves from the news. Yes, there's a Netflix documentary about the case coming out next year. No, I can't provide specific legal advice. But if you're facing workplace ethics issues, document everything and contact a whistleblower attorney immediately. Edit 2. To the person who asked if I regret missing Richard's birthday party, absolutely fucking not. Best career decision I ever made. Sometimes what looks like professional suicide is actually professional resurrection. Edit 3. Someone asked about Dr. Patricia Wells, the chief medical officer who cooperated with the investigation. She served 18 months in minimum security federal prison and now works for a non-profit that provides free medications to low-income patients. People can change when they face real consequences for their choices. Edit 4. For those asking about the current status of Blackstone's victims, the $2.3 billion settlement fund has provided compensation for medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering. It can't bring back the people who died, but it helps families who are still dealing with the consequences of Richard's fraud. Edit 5. A lot of people are asking about how to report pharmaceutical safety violations. The FDA has an official adverse event reporting system, FAS, but if you suspect deliberate fraud or cover-ups, contact the FDA's Office of Criminal Investigations directly. Document everything first, get legal advice, and remember that federal whistleblower protections exist for a reason. Remember, if you're facing ethical dilemmas at work, you're not alone. Document everything, seek legal counsel, and don't let anyone convince you that doing the right thing isn't worth the fight. Your conscience might be the only thing standing between corporate misconduct and public harm.